Welcome back. Welcome back to our podcast. And as you know, it is called "Firm Grasp on an Empty Bag," and we'll go through some of the reasons why as we speak during the next half hour. I'm thrilled to have as my guest Jerry Luckman, who is an old friend of mine. Not old Jerry, but just an
A
existing
long
friend
time,
for
Frank.
many years, right? So I got to be careful when I say that. And but just for the folks who are viewing for the first time, um, we put this together really to help existing owners of businesses, people who have family owned companies, family owned businesses, perhaps handed down from generation to generation. But for the folks who are perhaps looking to exit, maybe thinking about it, looking at the opportunity, our goal is to help right size the business, help them look at what are some of the defects in the business, perhaps what are some of the advantage of the business, and bring to you some of the experts that I have come across in my years of helping business owners who can work with you and help you understand some of the concepts that are necessary for you to get to the next step. For the most part, we work with folks who are looking for an exit or succession plan, perhaps looking for a path to selling their family-owned business, and really dedicated to that generation of folks. And a lot of them are baby boomers. And what we do find are probably 80% of many of our clients' wealth is trapped in the actual business. They've reinvested their money, they've put it back into the company on a regular basis, and it's all in there. And our goal is to help untrap it and kind of help them get it out of that business so that they can really enjoy the fruits of their labor, or perhaps whether they're ready to retire. We want them to try to be unencumbered. We want them to be in a position where they can enjoy their life going forward. And I think someone's exit strategy is more important today than ever. And as I said, I'm excited to have my good friend Jerry Luckman. Jerry is a partner at Deegan, Forchelli Terrana. It's a well-known law firm, especially here on Long Island, but they have helped a lot of folks throughout the country. They have 60 plus attorneys, 12 practice areas. Jerry is the chair of the firm's practice group. He is my go-to person when we're talking, especially with folks about bankruptcy or how to avoid it. And what I like about Jerry, he is kind of a real sense guy, pragmatic approach to practicing law. He has a good financial background in terms of financial management, and I think he has represented all different types of clients with all different solutions, whether it's a Chapter 11 bankruptcy case, folks who really have problems with distressed debt, folks who are looking to see how they can sell some of their assets outside of bankruptcy. He represents all different folks, creditors, debtors, landlords, and really has worked on a lot of corporate restructuring. So, Jerry, I'm glad you're here. I think what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, the firm a little bit in terms of what you and your background is, and what you're kind of dedicated to in terms of your practice.
Oh, thank you for that. So, again, my name is Jerry Luckman. I'm the chair of the Corporate Restructuring and Bankruptcy Department at Forchelli Deegan Terrana in Uniondale, New York. We're a full-service business law firm. We have a lot of concentration in real estate, tax certiorari, land use zoning, as well as commercial litigation and regular real estate and corporate type of work. My background before I was a lawyer, I was a finance manager at two companies. I was in charge of handling $80 million a month in accounts receivable, and I managed a department it was in the electrical distribution industry. I understand financial statements. I understand how to work with accountants. And I think my business background has helped me in dealings both with clients and resolving issues with clients, because a lot of what I do is out of court negotiation, a lot of workouts, a lot of wind downs of businesses when companies decide that maybe they don't want to continue, they just want to wind down, and maybe there isn't an asset to sell, or maybe there is and they want to sell and then wind down the business. So I do a lot of out of court work, but I also I've come across a lot of situations where families trying to sell a business or preserve value for the next generation, and I do counsel companies and a lot of times in those matters.
So Jerry, what I wanted to start with is, we've gone through this whole COVID period of the last 2 years, and I think there are some businesses that have done pretty well and some that have done pretty poorly. Do you see that coming up in the bankruptcy world? I mean, do you see that as something that's kind of brought some issues to bear, or has it kind of put those things off for a couple of years?
Well, I think that there will be an uptick in corporate bankruptcies next year. I think that there was a lot of free money out there, a lot of low-cost money, a lot of government support during the pandemic. Some companies use that money to right-size their business, to deal with issues they had, maybe do some improvements in their way they operate their business. Other people may have just used it to continue the status quo, saying, well, a PPP loan is used to preserve payroll. But if you had too many people on the books at the time, and you still do now, but you don't have that free money flowing in, now you're starting to face the problems you had as a business that you maybe could have taken the time during the pandemic to try to address. If there was a slowdown in the business, it's a good time to look at what is your business, what should it be, what size should it be, how should it operate, and is there a better way of doing things? So I think that there will be an uptick. I think there's a lot of the moratoriums on foreclosures and evictions; those have terminated. The courts have opened up again and are starting to catch up on the pipeline of pending matters. So there'll be companies that are facing issues that they may have put off for a few years.
And it's interesting you say that, because there are so many of our clients who've gotten PPP loans, and there have been several of them that have used it appropriately. I mentioned to you that one in our prior conversation where they used it to actually right-size their workforce, even grow the workforce, so that they knew coming out of COVID they would have a substantial amount of business waiting for them, and they were in a pretty good position. Yet we've seen others who, they didn't misuse the money. They just really didn't know what to do with it. I think they just kind of said, okay, it's free money. Let's pay this expense and pay that expense. And here they are coming out of COVID, and it kind of lost. So my question really is, I mean, have there been any changes to the law as to relief for any of these owners as it relates to, specifically to COVID, or if they end up in a foreclosure situation? Are they really back to where they were in 2019?
Well, I mean, there are other options where people have taken other types of loans and other types of assistance that might be industry specific. I know there was relief for restaurants at one point, but it didn't cover everyone, and a lot of companies did not get those grants or that relief. So I think what you're going to find is that a lot of people, even if they use the money, for its intended purposes, yes, they might have used it for payroll, but they fell behind in rent, because a lot of industries, maybe there wasn't the income or the revenue that they expected, and the government relief only covered a portion of or was meant to cover a particular type of expense, such as rent and preservation of employees, and they used it for employees, or they used it for other purposes, and now all of a sudden they're behind with the landlord and they're facing eviction, or they're having issues with trying to catch up. So
I also saw some folks who I guess there were a few other lending facilities available. A lot of them took, I guess they were EIDL loans,
yes.
which it's interesting because now they're coming back to roost, so to speak, because those loans are now requiring repayment, and they're relatively low interest rate, I think 3.75. But I guess that is now a long-term loan, right? So it's still going to be considered something they have to pay back, but now it's an additional debt on the business that if they really didn't use it for growth or didn't use it to kind of for good purposes, they could be in a pretty tough situation, I think.
Sure. What a lot of people, and a lot of those are also personally guaranteed as well, but the issue there is people, taking on the money that's available, and again, maybe getting loans that they might not otherwise have been available, and amounts that might not otherwise have been available to them. And yeah, if it was used, even if it's used in the business, but it wasn't used to really to right size the business or to deal with problems in the
Sure.
business, all it does is really adds another layer to the capital stack as far as a debt that needs to be repaid, and may have had the impact of lowering the value of a business because the extra debt that's on the company and the debt service that needs to be covered.
That's a great point, because a lot of our transactions are, a lot of them are cash-free, debt-free, right, transactions. So all of a sudden, any debt that's on the balance sheet needs to be resolved. And this is one I think people, not that they forgot about, but they didn't do it in the normal course of business. They just kind of were throwing this money. One of the things that we spoke about earlier is you talk about a business looking at a business and kind of doing a health checkup. And I thought it was a great concept in terms of that. And I think I wanted you to kind of go through that, how an owner can be maybe a benefit, what his options are, and what he would look at when we talk about a real health checkup.
Sure. So I gear this more for small and mid-sized businesses. And I do it as like a corporate health checkup, is what I call it. And it's really to get a feel for how the company is dealing with, say, insider transactions, how the company deals with loans from its shareholders or owners, repayment of those loans. I mean, there are issues that you take an S corporation where you have to make distributions to the shareholders, to cover their taxes, but a lot of times the company can't, continue to operate without the working capital. So the owners are constantly putting money back in. That they've taken the distributions, now they're putting those back in. So those officer loans or shareholder loans are on the books, and are they being serviced as loans or not? Are they being is it really just additional
Sure.
equity or capital put in? And I always say to people that when everything's going well and you're solvent and you're having no issues, or you're not looking for a transaction or a sale, how you do things from an accounting standpoint, say to minimize your income tax aspect or issues, may be one thing. But when you're looking at packaging a business for sale, or you're looking at a potential insolvency or a wind down, a creditor who may not be getting paid in full does not want to see that an officer loan was repaid, or an owner's loan was repaid at a time it's not getting it paid in full. Or if there's a litigation that comes up that was even unexpected, and that's going to impact the financial health of the company, it would be good to have things done a certain way, or have your books, your company records done looking a certain way, to protect the people that really didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with putting money back into a company after taking a distribution to pay taxes or whatever, or putting working capital back in, or even a loan back into the company. You just need to structure it the right way. And 9 times out of 10, or maybe more than that, the things haven't been structured that way. And you can take this beyond that. You can take it to looking at inventory levels. You can look at receivable turns, how quickly your receivables turn. How you're covering your debt service. You can look at all the financial aspects of a company, and figure out how what can be done better, or put that in a better shape going forward. So it's not only legal, but also some financial aspect that you need to look at.
Joe, that's a good point. It's amazing how many of our clients that we see, they have kind of self-financed the business over the years, right? And they've put cash back into the business on a regular basis. Not really, a lot of them haven't taken much in the way of debt. And all of a sudden, if they come to a point where they've exhausted the amount of cash that they can put in the business, they're really at their wits' end. They kind of are in a position where they are kind of strapped in terms of what they can put in, and I think they've kind of like exhausted their options. And if they go out to a lender or they go out to another party, I mean, what would they expect to see at that point?
Well, if they're going out to another lender, I mean, certainly all that's going to be subordinated, but the main concern is with how they structured things, whether the company is even bankable, as far as getting additional financing. They don't have the credit history. They don't have, maybe they haven't had a loan relationship with a bank for years. So now they want the $500,000 loan. They want to make it $1 million loan. They've had nothing, and now they're looking for the $1 million loan, whatever they need. So it's always, and I always say the best time to look at things and to look at how you run your business and how you finance your business is when you don't have an issue, and before you keep putting money into finance. There's, I always say you want to go to the doctor for the routine physical. You want to see your professionals for your checkup. You don't want to see your professionals the first time when you're in a stage 4 issue or something, or you're an extremis, because at that point, I'm taking from the bankruptcy context. If I was a company that the owner had put in all the money for years, now the owner's run out of money. Well, if he goes to he or she goes to a bankruptcy for the company, and they want to retain the equity, or they want to buy back their company from bankruptcy, where are they going to get that money? They already used up all their money by putting it in and losing it, and because they had it, they were putting the money in, and maybe they weren't addressing operational issues. Why did the company need all that money to survive, or that cash impact to survive? Did they keep on like long-term employees that were being paid more than possibly the job, justified? Did they not, did they structure things incorrectly? Were they in a facility that was much too large for their purposes, so their rent obligations were too high? You need to look at all these things and try to deal with them while you're in an economic position to address the issues, rather than when you're at the last minute in extremis. So, getting back to your main point though about looking for financing, I mean, it's one thing putting money in. I've seen other people try to finance a business by, say, not paying taxes, which is way too expensive to ever do that, whether it's payroll taxes or anything else, never advisable. But there is, if you have a real business, and you should try to develop credit relationships with lenders and have some financing, even if you don't need it today. A sudden order comes in, or you have unexpected growth, or an issue comes up. It's nice to have that little cushion there, and it's also good to have a relationship that you can grow on with the lender.
That's a great point. And it's funny, we recommend that to owners on a regular basis. We say, gee, it's great that you have no debt whatsoever on the balance sheet. It's fantastic. Some of them don't even have a line of credit, right? And we just said, hey, look, why are you financing the business with all of your own cash? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we find that a lot of folks, that's just the way they've done it over the years. Sometimes the business has been handed down, and it came from the previous generation, and they were told, hey, listen, we don't need to borrow any money. And because sometimes the message with us is, hey, your business is in pretty good shape. Have you considered perhaps growing the business through an acquisition? And boy, there's no better way to grow it through acquisition than by using perhaps bank money, or not necessarily putting your own capital in. I mean, I think it bodes well. It sounds to me though, we have the same type of clients in a lot of ways. It's really about planning more than anything else. And I don't think anybody really plans for bankruptcy, right? I mean, they just or do they? I mean, is there? I mean, I'm not sure. We haven't been that involved in it. I'll let you take the stage.
Well, and it's not that everybody plans for bankruptcy, but you should plan for a what if scenario. Sometimes companies get hit with litigation that was unexpected. Sometimes anything can happen. A company is too reliant on or too concentrated in one set of customers, and a largest customer files bankruptcy, and now there's a receivables not going to get collected, and impacts the cash flow of the business. So you do want to, you always want to be prepared for the something that might be eventual, and not that you want it to happen, but you want to plan. in case something happens, and whether that's arranging for financing or, in the case of, you say, the business owner puts all the money and self-funds the business. Well, if there's a downturn in that business, the creditors are not looking at, that those officers or those owners getting repaid. They want to get paid first. They don't care what you say that you characterize out in the books of. If there's not a promissory note and a UCC filing, and that loan is not secured and serviced like a true loan, everyone's going to just view it as that it's another part of equity, and equity gets paid last. If there was a lender involved, whether it's a typical bank, that bank would have filed a UCC filing to secure and have a security agreement. It would have secured itself to the company's assets, and that lender would have made sure that it got paid first before the other creditors got paid. And the owner, if they use bank financing, would have that money still in their pocket for not having put it in. They would still have that money, whether it's for whatever they want to do with it.
And it's interesting, it brings to mind, we had a case where a matter where one of our clients who was in the process of selling his company, he dealt mostly with big box stores. So he dealt with some of the big names that are out there. And one that he was dealing with in the Midwest was into him for about $3 million in terms of receivables and filed for bankruptcy. So all of a sudden, that $3 million became uncollectible. The client wanted to continue to do business and wanted to rearrange terms, to continue to do business. But it put a serious hurt on the business because all of a sudden that $3 million, which had been coming in pretty routinely before that, so it kind of blindsided them. One of the things we talk to folks about often is not having too much concentration of customers, right? And keep an eye on your receivables. And this gentleman who owned the business really was not in a position to put any personal capital in the business. And he was somebody, he had pretty much extended his lines of credit pretty much significantly. So it put him in a position where he actually had to sell off some of his other assets in order to stay afloat. He sold off some real estate at that point. So he was fortunate enough to have some liquidity in that real estate.
So it's beyond today's topic, but if there had ever a situation where a company finds itself with a large creditor filing bankruptcy, they really should seek out counsel almost immediately. There are possibly, depending on whether goods or what's been sold, there are protections that could be had. There could be additional rights that might otherwise be available to those companies as creditors. And even if they decide to sell going forward, there's not a guarantee that if you sell to a company in bankruptcy that you're going to get paid. There's and I'm only going to spend a couple of minutes because I know it's a little bit beyond the topic, but there are horror stories out there about people thinking that, well, I'll have an administrative claim in bankruptcy, I'll be equal to the professional, so of course I'll get paid. Well, it doesn't always happen. There was a lot of issues, even like in the Toys R Us case, where a lot of the post-petition creditors were not paid, even though they all thought or led to believe that they would be paid. So, anytime you're involved, this is something that you should reach out to a professional immediately on. There might be an opportunity to raise your claim to a higher level, right? And there also, you need protections whether you continue to sell. You need to have an informed business decision on that.
So in those cases, Jerry, they weren't paid because other folks got paid before them? Is that
well? There's secured debt that comes first, even before administrative debt. And if a company goes into a liquidation and the sale of the assets or the sale of the business does not pay the secured debt in full, then there's no money for anyone else. The professionals usually work on what's called a carve out. So they'll have an agreement with the secured creditor to carve out from the secured creditor's lien some money to pay the professional cost of running the bankruptcy, but not all the suppliers, not the people who are providing goods and services to the post-petition debtor. And it happens more and more, and especially when there's a liquidation scenario.
Makes sense. I know you've been in practice a few years. Have there been situations where you've seen, several companies kind of maybe under one corporate entity, or maybe where some of them survived bankruptcy, where those entities continued to prosper afterwards, and perhaps there were parts of the organization that kind of went away?
Oh, sure. There's, listen, bankruptcy done correctly is a great way to strip off unprofitable subsidiaries or entities or divisions, to really get a chance to right size your business, right size the capital stack. Sometimes you convert some debt to equity. There's a lot of options on what can be done. Um, it's a great way to shed leases if you have, you could be a retailer and have, with 10 locations and 4 are profitable and 6 aren't. So maybe you want to get rid of those leases, or we try to restructure those leases. Or maybe you want to go to an internet model or an online e-commerce model rather than fully brick and mortar. There's a lot of opportunities to try to right size the business, and even sometimes in packaging a business for sale, going through a bankruptcy process with an interested buyer being the stalking horse bidder, or the opening bidder for the company, is the right thing, because the buyer then gets the cleaner company. It doesn't have to deal with the shedding of the leases or some of the legacy debt that might be on the company that's really preventing the company from flourishing or from really moving forward. So I've seen that happen a lot. I've been involved in cases like that. I've been involved in cases where, if it didn't go through the bankruptcy process, it wouldn't have been able to right size the debt and wouldn't be able to preserve the jobs of the people working for the company for many years. And they took it through chapter, and it was a great result. And now with subchapter 5, which is a relatively new section of the bankruptcy code, as part of chapter 11, but it's for businesses with less than $7.5 million of debt.
Really?
You could go through a bankruptcy, no quarterly fees to the trustee, no creditors committee. You allows a business owner to keep the company as long as they meet certain requirements as far as what they're paying over time to the creditors. And it means that an owner doesn't necessarily have to buy out their company from bankruptcy. They don't have to go into a liquidation. They get to preserve it by meeting certain thresholds, which so it's been very successful for those.
Jerry, does it restructure that debt, or does some of
Yeah,
that debt that
it, no, it, it
that doesn't go
restructures
away,
it.
right?
No, it does. No, it restructures. So if you have a plan in a sub 5 where creditors are getting 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar, that's what they're getting under your plan,
Really?
and you're keeping the business as long as you devote the disposable income of the company over a period of time to dealing with that. I mean, I'm kind of giving it short strokes here.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
if this is something that's of interest to someone, they really should meet with a professional and discuss all of their options. But it was enacted to deal with the problems that small business owners were having, and that so many of them were losing their businesses, going through a bankruptcy process that initially was much too expensive for a small to mid-sized business. And this section of the code was designed to address that, where it's a less expensive, more streamlined process, geared for allowing a business owner to preserve its business and continue with a right-sized debt structure.
And I think a lot of smaller businesses who probably would qualify for that may be just uninformed in terms of what their options are. So I think
Right.
one of the things that we'll do, we're almost at the end of our time, but I think we'll make sure that somebody and why don't we do it now? Actually, if somebody has questions about those, I'm sure you'd be open to answer those questions. What's a good way? I mean, is there a good way for them to get in touch with you, Jerry?
Sure. I mean, my office is in Uniondale. I have my office number is 516-248-1700. I'm in every day. The whole office is in every day. So I'm happy to speak with people about, if they have issues or questions on this.
Because I got to tell you, we've dealt with a lot of small business owners over the years, and a lot of it's really just lack of information. I think some people feel they get to the point where they're desperate and they really don't know what to do. So we always point them in the direction of a professional. Sometimes, Jerry, it's not the professionals they're dealing with at the moment.
Right.
They have to look beyond the border, so to speak.
I always find that people, the last thing they want to do is pick up a phone and call an attorney because they figure it's going to cost them money. But sometimes it costs so much more by not picking up the phone and calling the professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And
you have to make a business decision on what makes sense. And, you can only make that decision if you're informed.
Yeah, I think the key is really for the people in the audience to really, you call an expert like Jerry. And I don't say that just because you happen to be on the show. I think, clearly you would have solutions for them, or at least alternatives. Sometimes there are no solutions, right? Sometimes there are just alternatives, and it'll make somebody feel like they're going in the correct direction. So I do appreciate that. So we're at the end of our time. I know. I think we spoke. We said, what are we going to fill 30 minutes up with? And you'd be surprised. It goes pretty quick. We could keep talking for a long time. I wanted to thank Jerry for being on the show, and it's at Forchelli Deegan Terrana. Jerry is a great attorney and somebody who you could talk to. And I think that's as important as anything else. And I do appreciate you being on the show. Our goal really is for people who are business owners, especially lower middle market business owners, to realize that their investment has to be protected in one way, shape, or form. Because the last thing they want to do is have a situation where the investment and of time and energy and money that they've made over the years ends up being, all for naught. And I think there are definitely alternatives to consider. And if you are, questioning whether you're going to be able to kind of see the future go forward, or what you can do to kind of restructure your debt, or what you need to do to kind of right-size the business, please give me a call. We can certainly point you in the direction of Jerry. If you can't get in touch with him directly, we can help you with that. And our goal here at the NYBB Group is really just to bring resources like Jerry Luckman to our marketplace, to bring it to the lower middle market folks who we deal with. Some of them need professionals that they can rely on, that they can count on, folks that they can go to in a moment of need, and also to make sure that they maximize the value of what really is their largest investment. So until next time, I wanted to thank everyone for viewing, and thank you, Jerry, for your time. And I know it's very valuable, and I thank you for great information.
And thank you for having me, Anthony.
Take care, guys. Have a great day.
Be well.
Stay on.